Welcome everybody to the Fantasy Golf Insider Webcast and Podcast. I'm Jeff Bergerson, joined as always by my partner Zach Turcotte. We're with FantasyGolfInsider.com, where you need to go on and sign up if you have not already. The Open Championship, our third major, is upon us. It's time to get in the game, start winning some cash, and we're here to help you do that. We are also available as podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so be sure to go on and check out that. Give us a good review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Obviously, the Open Championship is what we're going to talk about this week, Zachary. But before we do that, we need to recap last week.
Okay.
And because there was not a PGA Tour event last week, instead we're going to recap our trip to Las Vegas.
Yeah, everybody's going to be excited about that one.
We often refer to the Monday after Vegas as being a bad thing, and this is in fact literally our Monday after Vegas. So
it's the worst day of the year.
Pretty much. But we had an excellent time. We were able to meet a lot of cool people out there, including several FGI members who made it a point to come up to us and greet us and introduce themselves. So we hung out with some of them. Nice to meet them. We went to UFC 200, which was an absolute blast. Saw our boy Brock Lesnar come back after 5 years off and win. What were some of your highlights, Zachary?
Brittany. Right here.
You're just going to lead right into Brittany.
Yeah, why not? Yeah,
right.
It was outstanding. I kind of went into the show not certain which one of us would know more lyrics to her songs, and I feel like I need to concede that it was in fact you who had me beat in terms of lyrical knowledge of Brittany's catalogs. So I was really proud of you for that. But
thanks, I appreciate that.
Outstanding show. That was a lot of fun.
We took quite a bit of heat for going to Brittany, and I guess if you're not into like upbeat music, dancing lights, pyrotechnics, then I guess it wasn't fun.
Decent looking crowd.
Well, that's what I was gonna. Yeah, if you're not into like smoking hot girls in their late 20s and 30s, all done up, hair, makeup, short black skirts, all getting lathered up at the concert, then it's not the place for you. So don't ever go. But if you're a single dude, I think there's probably no better place.
Although I will say Koi nightclub afterwards. Perhaps a little bit lacking.
Big shout out. I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sure
Good endorsement.
They'll be comping us next time we go there. Although when you and I are two of the prettier people inside the club, the club has got some issues.
Oh,
so
stop right there.
That was, I mean, it was entertaining. Yeah, if anybody ever tries to get you a $225 bottle at a Las Vegas club, realize that club probably isn't as exciting as you would hope for it.
And then when you say, well, can we take a look inside first? Yeah. We've been there enough times, we should know better.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Oh well. Good trip. Anything else that you want to talk about?
No, I'm just going to watch my energy slowly build back up throughout the show.
We'll try and get you there. Why don't we start with a little Brit shot, huh?
It's Vegas, bitch.
So let's go right into the Open. We don't have a wacky wager from last week, but you want to try and solicit one for this week?
Yeah, there's a couple of offers coming in this week. Obviously, being for the Open Championship, we want something of quality this week, so I will definitely be pounding away today, tomorrow, and Wednesday throughout the afternoon, hopefully to get something kind of fun and exciting for the wacky wager.
All right. The Open this year is coming to us from Royal Troon Golf Club over in Scotland. It's a par 71 course, 7,190 yards.
Yep.
For greens, we got, it's kind of a mix of bent grass and POA. So you can take a look at that when you're looking at the different types of grass. Key stats: strokes gained tee to green, strokes gained putting. Driving accuracy is going to be really important. As is in all Open Championships, accuracy is really going to rule out. Distance isn't going to hurt you, but you got to stay on the fairway.
Got to stay out of the mess.
Yeah, huge traps that are very difficult to get out of going straight forward. Big time thick rough, and then obviously the gorse bushes you don't want to be in because that will cost significant strokes.
And of course, biggest statistic every year at the Open Championship is the weather.
Yeah.
And that's something that we haven't looked at too closely this week. We don't want to put out a recommendation at this point in terms of the weather, but be sure you're looking at the weather all the way up pretty much until tee time. Yep. Last year we had a big score on this event right here, just due to the fact that we went a little bit contrarian. Jeffrey had put out the best players who had the best weather right away, because that was the best weather. The whole tournament probably was that first wave early on Thursday morning, and you got a whole group of 6 guys out there and started. They got off to a great start. Everything turned into a complete mess after that. So you weren't necessarily going to get guys teeing off in the afternoon or the next morning or the next afternoon. It was basically going to be whenever they got up to the point where they could get guys out onto the course. So you got 6 guys out of the gate who got off to a great start, including Zach Johnson. Carried you to victory. We ended up earning one of our 2 seats for the Fantasy Golf World Championships last year. So weather definitely a huge factor. And you're going to want to balance your teams a little bit, even if you see that the best weather might be that Thursday morning. Initially, the AM, PM kind of tee times. Make sure you throw a couple contrarian teams in there too, where you swap against it, because the weather here changes so quickly back and forth that if you're the guy who has thrown in that 1 or 2 contrarian squads when everybody else rode the other wave, it can give you a little bit of an edge if you're doing some of the smaller entrant GPPs for this week. So if you're in one of those 40-man or 200 or 300-man fields, you can have a little bit of a contrarian kick there with your tee times. So weather is certainly going to be probably one of the most important things that you're going to look at overall when evaluating how to build your lineup for the week.
Another strategy that went into me constructing that team, not only stacking the weather, was also guys who play consistent golf. They don't get into big trouble, throw up the double and triple bogeys. The team had Zach Johnson, Jim Furyk, Matt Kuchar on it. These are steady accuracy guys who don't blow up on a lot of holes. And we often see those guys play well in major tournaments because of that. So take a look at that. Also par 5 scoring, birdie or better. Obviously we could throw in bogey avoidance like I just talked about. So you want to start talking about the players themselves?
Yeah, I think at the top here, we're going to want to look at some of the higher owned guys that are going to be also the highest priced, I think, this week. Obviously, with an event like the Open Championship, you get a lot of soft pricing, which is going to allow you to put in 2 studs at the top and still have 4 other guys on the team who you're going to feel pretty good about in terms of what's going on there. So I think when we looked at it, there was really 4 guys that we were just briefly talking about before who are going to be probably the most heavily owned this week. If you look right at the top, we've got Jason Day and Dustin Johnson right up there. They've both had outstanding seasons so far. We talk about the big 3 quite a bit of the time, but it's really just been the big 2.
The big 2. They've separated themselves from pretty much everybody else.
Certainly. And so I think those guys are probably going to be owned by 25%, maybe even a little higher in that for the rest of the field. And I think my strategy this week is going to be to hold my breath and fade both those 2 guys at the top. And it isn't due to the fact that I don't think that they can play really well or that they can contend. I just think that there is plenty of value around them, just a little bit lower. And it's not necessarily the case. This would be the one major out of the 4 each year where things really can go haywire in terms of where guys are finishing and where guys go. I mean, DJ last year looked like he was in great shape until day 3 and then completely plummeted. And this hasn't necessarily been an event where he's dominated over the years. So I think if you're looking to be a little bit contrarian there at the top, or really from my strategy, it's more just to save some money right up there at the top, I will probably look to fade those 2 guys. How about you? Are you going to be in on either of those 2?
You know, if I were to go with one of them, it would probably be Jason Day. But I think I as well am going to avoid that even the top 4. I don't like Spieth's accuracy right now on a course where you got to be accurate. He's been spraying it absolutely all over the place. And Rory, I just don't have that much confidence in, frankly, this year. I like to drop down. A guy who I really like coming into the event is Adam Scott. I think he has a great Open history. He's always in the mix come the final round.
He really was one of those guys last year on the last day where he was in the lead basically and just had a rough stretch on that back 9.
He missed like a 1-foot putt or something that was just disgusting, and it just came off the rails after that. But he still finished with a top 10. So.
Yeah, and he's at 4 straight top 10s. So
he's been really good this year. He's shown his upside yet again. So we know that he's got the potential to win an event.
Very solid ball striker. And you don't know what's going to happen overall with the putting, but at majors, one of the nice things that does favor a guy like Scott is that everybody is struggling on the greens a little bit. And so his normal struggles aren't going to be amplified quite as much considering how well he tends to hit the ball from tee to green.
So the other guy I like, and I'm sure you like too, is Sergio right there as well.
I do. I wish he was a little bit cheaper. Yeah. I wish he was like lower 9,000s instead of being right up there at 10.
This will help the ownership though, because I think if people go with the studs, they're going to elect to go with the Day and the DJ.
I think so.
And not drop down. So I think that's going to help you on the ownership.
I think Garcia and Scott are probably going to be close in that 15%.
That was my prediction.
Plus or minus a little bit right there, depending on what the buzz looks like for the rest of the week in terms of what people are on. But yeah, I definitely like both of those guys. I think I may even get back in a little bit on Henrik Stenson this week after he crushed everybody at the U.S. Open. He had a win. And had he not had such a miserable start on Thursday at the Scottish Open, he would have been in contention again in Scotland. So clearly, there was no health issue.
No injury?
Whatsoever for him.
It's good to know Daniel Berger's not seriously injured as well. Aren't you glad he tweeted out his MRIs came back good?
Because that's what we were worried about.
Right.
Yeah. So I think Stenson this week, I think he bounces back too. And he might be the guy who does get a little bit overlooked. Because I feel like Sergio is pretty popular. I feel like Scott, with his history here, is still going to be a guy that a lot of people like. Stenson might be that guy who drops down at. You can get him for 8 to 10% in terms of his ownership level there too. So, I'm not terribly excited about going in big on those guys at the top, but overall, I think there's a couple of decent plays.
I'm just trying to process the fact that you just said Sergio is going to be popular. Wow, what a year does! My gosh,
and a win, and a win.
Crazy.
And so, he's been great the last couple of months, even though he's still not terribly active overall in terms of how much he's playing. But from the limited time that he has been out there, he has been very good. So those are all the guys at the top I will look at. There wasn't a lot dropping below there in the 9,000s.
No, I'm worried about Rose still with the injury. I'm not sure that he's 100%. Willett has looked like crap.
Yeah, and Rose hasn't been great at the Opens.
No, he hasn't.
This hasn't typically been a tournament where he's really excelled.
Right.
And you got Louis Oosthuizen. And I know that we're never really big on Louis, but if you're going to be big on Louis at any point, this is the time when you probably would jump in at an event like this. And that's a little easier to say. He's won this event several years back, and he took second here, lost in the playoff last year, and he's looked pretty good over the last couple times out. So I could see jumping in on him, particularly in like GPP play.
Sure.
Just because he's a guy who does tend to elevate his game for better events. I may own a little bit of Phil Mickelson at 8,600 there. He's another guy who tends to do really well at the Open. Did well this last weekend in Scotland. Has been having a pretty good season. Two guys I will look at on the European side will be Lee Westwood. As well as Martin Keimer.
Hey, don't jump on that bandwagon.
I had to get in there before you did. Yeah, I had to start it this week. I like stealing some of your picks away. So, Lee Westwood didn't really have that great of a year last year. He didn't. He had been playing really well, really consistently after year. And he's been going through some personal things back home, obviously, with getting divorced in the last couple of years.
It's funny how his play is picked up now.
Yeah. Now that he's single again, why wouldn't it? I haven't seen pictures of his girlfriend floating around.
I'm sure she's terrible to look at.
Yeah, if he even has one. If he doesn't have one, then his game's probably perfect.
Right.
So, that said, he looks fantastic at the Masters.
Yeah.
Just really under the radar and squeaking in at second place out of nowhere, and then. He's been really good. 4 of his last 5 events, he's been in the top 15. That really should have been 5 of 5 had he not played just atrociously bad on Sunday at the U.S. Open. It looked like he actually had a shot at contending there all the way up until the end. And he's a guy who's been playing pretty well as far as his run over in Europe this year. He's had a few top 10 finishes on the European Tour, and he's also finished in 4th the last time it was at Royal Tour. Now, I'm not saying base your decision on what a guy did 12 years ago at an event, but he did do well there, so just kind of something you can take into consideration.
That's the cherry on top.
Well. Exactly, and that's like the last little thing that you can take a look at. And then dropping down, should I give Keimer?
No, go ahead. You can have Keimer. Fine.
He's an elite level player. Hasn't had another guy didn't have a very good 2015 at all.
No, he was miserable last year.
Coming off of 2014 where you won at the Players and followed that up at the U.S. Open. really did nothing at all last year. But again, he's a guy who's been playing. He lost his tour card actually last year, which was pretty disappointing for him after a really good year previously. But he's been doing really well over in Europe. So another guy with 4 of his last 5 events where he's been in the top 15.
Yeah.
He was in the top 15 at the Open Championship a year ago. And he does tend to pick up his game at the more difficult courses that are out there.
Yep.
So at 8,400, I think you get a pretty good buy on Martin Kaymer.
What do you think his ownership's going to be?
I don't think it gets to be that high.
I don't either.
Primarily because most of his big finishes have been over in Europe.
Correct.
The events here in the U.S.
on the PGA Tour.
Kind of mediocre. He hasn't necessarily missed cuts, but the finishes have been 40th, 35th in that range, which isn't really going to catch a lot of people's eye.
What do you think? 12%?
At the most.
Yeah.
He's really been a guy who's been in that 5 to 7 range
he has
for most of last year. And I think being a little better maybe gets him closer to 10 for this particular event. But 8,400, I think he's a really strong cash play right there.
Agreed.
And I'll probably have some exposure as well for my Millionaire Maker lineups.
Okay. Dropping down a little bit, I think 2 of the other highest owned besides Day and DJ are going to be a couple of guys at 7,800, Matt Kuchar, Charles Schwartzel. I just think the price is so cheap for where their game is at right now, both in top current form. And, I just think people are going to load up on them. I think both of those guys will be owned by more than 20%. They both were for the U.S. Open.
Yeah,
correct?
And the prices are lower.
Yeah, they're lower. And for cash games, I'll just make them a staple in all of my cash games.
And we were talking before we went on air here tonight. I think my play might actually be to fade those 2 for GPPs a little bit too. And again, it's not going to matter so much in the Millionaire Maker.
No.
I mean, if Charles Schwartzel takes 4th place in this tournament,
you're going to need him.
You probably needed to have him on your team. So
Yep.
from that perspective, don't think about it too much. But in all the other GPPs that are out there, from the $300 where you'll have around 1,000 people all the way up to the 33. Well, they don't have the regular 33, but for events where there's maybe 10,000 entries or less, you can fade those 2 guys.
I don't think it's a bad strategy because if you shave off those 4 guys and none of them taking the top 5, you're going to be sitting pretty.
Yeah, I mean, those 4 guys will make up about a little over 1/6 of all ownership percentage within the field for the week. So I think you can dodge all 4 of those guys, and it's a risk, but I don't really think it's a crazy.
I don't either. It's unpredictable, like we talked about. With the winds pick up, anything can happen.
Yeah, certainly.
Dropping down a little bit lower than that, a couple of guys who I like. I had mentioned Andy Sullivan before at 7,200. I talked about him as one of my sleepers when I was on with Pat Mayo. I think his track record looks pretty good, or his current form at least.
So I like him the last 5 times.
He has been, yeah. Anyone you like in that 7K range or 6s?
I think I mentioned him at least every week on the show, but Mark Leishman at 7,400 has had 2 straight top 5 finishes at the Open. Statistically, he's been fantastic this year in terms of his tee to green game, his putting game. He scrambles pretty well. He can score on the par 5s. He's got plenty of distance. All things which should help him to do well again this week. And down at 7,400, I think that's a nice price for him. There's not a lot of risk for that particular price. I certainly, I don't want to jinx him by saying I certainly don't think he will miss the cut. But
I think he is going to be overlooked because he's right below the Schwartzel Kuchar and right by Scott Piercy, who I think is going to be a popular play for a lot of people, and even Russell Knox is going to be somewhat popular. So
I think so too. I think those guys will definitely be guys that are owned. The other guy you could look at 7,200 who's another European, Nicholas Colsertz. He doesn't have a ton of history here.
I know you're especially fond of the European guys who come in great current form, bad track record at the Open.
And then they just cut my throat.
You get all excited coming in. You're like, oh, these guys are at 6K. They're playing so well.
Who did it last year? Shane Lowry. Ooh, he hurt me last year. Tommy Fleetwood. That one smoked me. There was I think there may have been another one. So yeah, be a little bit careful with some of these guys.
It's bound to happen. But.
It does get tricky, but yeah, I mean, there's not much you can do. They've all just been playing really well, and I think they are definitely guys who are going to get a little bit overlooked. Some of these guys are only going to be owned by maybe 2 or 3% of the field overall. So those are guys there in that range. I think A European that you probably will be able to put a little bit more trust in would be Francesco Molinari at 7,000.
He's actually had a good history at the Open.
He has a good Open history. He's in good form.
Yep.
He's played well his last couple times out at these European events. So I think at 7,000, I think he is a pretty strong play as well. Probably will be a guy who attracts a little bit more in terms of ownership, but
Possibly.
I don't see him spiking too much.
I don't think he's going to be over 5 or 6.
I think probably 7 to 10%.
You think that high?
I think so, somewhere in that range. Yeah, so I think those are guys definitely to look at. Dropping down into this, 7K or below.
Yeah.
Now this is kind of where it gets important to. If you're stacking up top, who are you going to find in those 6,000 range in order to put your teams over the top?
A guy who I've been recommending pretty much all season, my boy Rafa Cabrera-Bello, has been nothing short of spectacular this year. He's got a bunch of top 10s. He racks up DK points. He's a birdie machine. He's one of these European guys in great form who's going to come into the Open.
Should be okay.
It seems like, he's pretty accurate for the most part. I like him at 6,900.
He's been good against the elite field. So I think that's kind of where some of the issues come into play is a lot of these guys, they've been playing just against the European players over and over again.
The Nordea Masters.
Right, yeah. One of the 6 BMW tournaments that are out there. Which one was that? So I think that's probably part of it, but he's had some experience in big moments now, so that I don't think it shouldn't shake him up too much.
And he has, you look back at his Open history, not great, but he's a different player this year, and we talk about that a lot. You can kind of cut off people's history leading into an event if they're a different player.
And that leads me to Tyrell Hatton. And I'm trying to figure out if I need to cut off his 4 for 4 of missing the cut at the Open Championship. And I think that I will.
Okay. All right.
And he's 12 out of 14 this year in terms of making a cut. He's only 24. So a lot of these events have been in the earlier stages of development in terms of his career. But he's only missed 2 cuts on the season. He does have 4 top 10s. He's been playing very well on the European Tour. At 6,600, that's a nice price. I'm not going to go down there for cash games, obviously. This is a range in the 6,000. I just don't think you need to take that much risk for your cash games this week, so I'm not going to drop down there. But I will have some exposure to a guy like Tyrell Hatton, and I'll probably have exposure to another guy who was very popular last year for a while until he didn't play all that great. But
who was that?
Joust Louten, because everybody liked to say Juiced.
Yep.
Yeah, so Joust Louten has been exceptional this year over in Europe. He's only missed 3 cuts in 16 starts. He's actually got 8 top 10 finishes.
He's been awesome
on the year, which I think will surprise most folks. And he's only 6,500 this week.
Yeah.
And he's obviously missed the last couple of cuts at the Open Championship, but again, 6,500. I think there's still tremendous upside for a player like that who's been just exceptional this year as well. Is there anybody else that you'd be looking at? Because there are a lot of guys in even the lower 6. There's even a couple in the 5 range that I'm going to own this week.
Yeah, I mean, just off that same theme, Bernd Wiesberger is another guy coming in great form.
Hasn't been great at the Open Championship.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Thomas Pieters is another guy with a lot of upside. Again, European Tour player.
What do you think about Steve Stricker at 6,400?
I don't know that I've ever picked Steve Stricker.
I mean, it's interesting because he hasn't played here for about 3-4 years. So it's been a while. But before, when he did play here, he was really a solid player here. And if you look at statistically throughout his career, this should be the kind of event that he does really well. And he's very accurate. He's very strong with his putter. He stays out of trouble. He's obviously not a huge par 5 scoring machine by any stretch, but he's always been a pretty good tee to green player throughout his career who doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and he's at 6,400 this week.
That's an interesting pick, Zachary.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be alone in it, but 6,400, I just look at the names that are down here. Even a guy like Danny Lee at 6,300, coming off of a really solid finish at the Scottish Open. He doesn't miss a lot of cuts, which is nice. He does tend to disappoint me with his 53rd
Just let me know what side you're on. Are you on the pro Danny or the anti?
Because I didn't own him in Scotland last week when he was third.
So if you're on him, I'll avoid. If you're avoiding, I'll be.
But that's a nice price, and then dropping all the way down to 6,200, making his debut at the Open Championships would be Dirt McGirt. Who is another guy who's pretty accurate off the tee, good tee to green game, and he's been pretty solid as far as.
Yeah, he's been really good.
Yeah, this whole season he's played well above where he's been throughout the rest of his career. So it's another spot where I think you could get a little bit of salary savings as well.
You did mention cash games, and I will just say we always advocate during these major events and the millionaire makers.
Yeah.
Don't forget about the cash games, because you're getting all the new players in and they're trying cash games. You really get a lot of value. So don't just take your bankroll and put it in the Millie Maker. Stay true to your 80% into cash games, 20 into GPPs. Take your shot in the Millie Maker. Pick some teams, but play the core in cash and you will probably do really well. As you have in just about every major I think we've ever done, we've done pretty well.
Yeah,
in cash.
It's been solid. Even this year, where there's been bumps other weeks in cash.
Yep.
The majors have been great for us in terms of returns for cash games. So, yeah, definitely take. I think you can take a pretty balanced approach overall this week. You don't have to go stars and scrubs by any stretch, which is a little bit of a flip for some folks. Because one of the things that we've been noticing on the European tour for a lot of those events is stars and scrubs is been actually the optimal way to approach a lot of these lineups. So taking a more balanced look at who's available out there, you can do plenty. I mean, if you just start your cash game teams with Schwartzel and Kuchar, you've already picked two guys who are $500 below the average salary, so it's already freed up quite a bit of space to move up and fill out the rest of your roster.
Be sure to do your 3 cash game teams, and Zachary puts 3 optimal lineups in his Daily Spin article, which comes out on Wednesdays. Take a look at those if you want some ideas. We never include the same guy in all 3 lineups, just in case something happens. You don't blow up your entire bankroll. Kind of diversify within the core for your optimal cash games. And
I think that's it. Yeah, and there's going to be a handful of other picks. We gave quite a few in the 6 range, but there's a handful of others, even in the 5K range, that I'm going to look at this week. I'm not going to get excessive about it, but there's 2 or 3 guys that are even down in that range that I will be adding to my GPP rosters for the week. So
I will mention that they did add some players. So if you went in early, right when the price is released, and you didn't take a look, they're they add 6 or 7 guys today, I think, to the field. A couple which kind of interests me quite a bit. Daniel Summerhays came in at like 5,800. And he's a guy who looked really good on a difficult Oakmont course.
Okay, there's one of the 3 I was going to mention in the 5,000.
Oh, I apologize.
in my column.
You're going to have to find someone else.
Yeah, okay. Well, I have 2 others.
All right. So there are some good new ads. Take a look at those. Anyone else that you want to talk about? Any other strategies? Any other stories from Vegas? Anything else, Zachary?
No.
Thanks for that.
No other stories from Vegas. No.
All right. Well, be sure to check us out, fantasygolfinsider.com. We're at Fantasy Golfers on Twitter. You can always email us with strategy questions, lineup composition, anything like that at info@fantasygolfinsider.com. Check Zachary out on Periscope on Wednesday nights. You'll be on Wednesday probably for a while. It'll be real close to the tee-off time actually this week, which is sweet.
That'll be kind of cool.
So that's great. As far as anything else goes, you good?
I'm excited. Can you feel the energy? Can you feel it?
I'll send out my update email with the latest weather conditions on Wednesday. If there's any withdrawals, which I don't think there will be, look for that email as I do every Wednesday night. If you're not getting that, let us know.
Yes, definitely let us know.
So, good luck this week for the Open Championship, and we will talk to you next week.
Good luck.